I might need to sneeze.
Yeah, my eyes are bothering me. We should leave this in. We should totally leave this in.
Really?
This is how the sausage is made, guys. It's not all the glitz and glamour that you're so used to.
And you might notice we're wearing the same clothes we were wearing last week.
Yeah,
That's because it's 5 minutes later than last week.
Yeah.
In our world.
Yeah, I did take my hoodie off because production value, but I'm
not taking my shirt off.
Yeah, well, so anyway, we were gonna talk for this canned evergreen garbage episode. We were gonna talk about the book we're writing, because we are writing a book about stage performance.
Yeah, we're actually making progress on it, unlike the AO album we said we were going to write last year.
Right. No, I know. I love that you keep bringing that up in that way.
My vocals are done on that one track.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Let's get to the book. Let's get to the book. Yeah, so we decided a few months ago to write a book about stage performance, and we've been... last few weeks, it's been on the calendar since we've been back from the holidays.
Yeah.
And we have been making progress and really sawing away at it. Mm-hmm. And we just thought we'd talk to you guys about it. One of the reasons we wanted to talk to you about it is if you do have requests or questions.
Oh, yeah, we can say that up front.
That's part of why we wanted to talk about it. If there's stuff you might want to know about stage performance, or stuff that you want to make sure is addressed, or any ideas or whatever, you pointed out, don't put them in the comments of the YouTube, because we do not look at YouTube comments.
Ever.
It's possible they could be mean, so they haven't been ever yet. But
no, they have been.
Oh, they have been?
Oh, I got a vicious one from another vocal coach one time.
Whoa.
It was several paragraphs.
Oh, no.
About how bad my video was and how wrong I was.
Oh my gosh.
And
okay.
Then I contacted, I think I posted on Facebook about it. I didn't name any names. I was like, I just got the most vicious comment, and someone DM'd me, another famous vocal coach DM'd me and was it this guy? And I was like, yeah.
Whoa.
And they were like, yeah, he's known for doing that. I was like, oh my gosh.
Okay.
But anyway.
So we don't
then on.
You don't look at YouTube comments.
So email me.
info@performancehigh.net.
Yeah.
We're on the social medias.
We'll put it in the description.
Yeah, but if you have any thoughts, man, hit us up.
What do you want to know about performing? So why we're writing this?
Yeah.
Let's start there. Well, the inspiration for it came because we made content for the stage performance class we ran last fall, and we were like, oh, we're writing a book. We're kind of already writing.
We were doing handouts for each unit of the class.
Yeah.
And it started to feel like, wow, this is fleshed out. This is a book.
Right. And it is something that we realize we have something to add to the conversation.
Right.
Which is a better reason for writing a book, when you think you have something to say. You know, Good
point.
I've gotten certified as a Tom Jackson live music coach years ago. That I don't think it's a thing that's offered anymore. So it's certainly not current, but I learned a lot from him, and he's got a framework.
Right.
And a lot of that framework is really strong and really valid. I mean, all of it is really strong and really valid. He works with Taylor Swift.
And Tom Jackson is the last word / only word on a lot of the core concepts of performing. He was the first on the scene. Mm-hmm. His book is not in print anymore, but it goes for $100 on Amazon now.
Yeah. And so I've consumed all of his stuff and learned a ton from him. But as we've continued to perform, and you know, you've been doing this stuff your entire life. You've been analyzing performances your entire life.
Yeah,
since before you could play music.
Yeah.
You were analyzing your own performance, holding a guitar and looking like you were playing.
It's a story I tell all the time. My childhood best friend Wes and I decided we were going to play guitars, and before we even started learning to play single notes, we were setting up his camcorder and videotaping ourselves pretending to play along to songs, and then watching that video back and analyzing, oh, you don't look cool doing that. Oh, that's awesome. And so, yeah, literally before I could play a note, I was concerned with how it looked when you were doing it. Yeah, the performance side of it. So,
but that takes us into kind of the bigger the bigger thing we want to talk about, and the
Right.
bigger reason for writing a
Right.
book, is this book is not about how to move on stage. It's not a
Right.
prescription of like, when the song does this, you do that. I mean, that's the last piece of, that's the last thing to think about.
Right.
And that, I mean, that's more like the symptom than the cause, you know? So
Right.
we feel like we have a unique perspective on why you put on shows, why people go to shows, and what an audience is looking for.
And that is where that's sort of how we're attacking the subject of performance, is we're starting first with like, let's do a real examination of why do people even want to go to shows? Why do people want to enjoy live music? When they're enjoying live music, what's happening? Mm-hmm. And then let's go through all that and then build our skills up from there.
Right. So all the skills have context of
Right.
of why it makes sense to try to do this thing that we tell you we think is a good idea to
Right.
do. It's much, so that way it's, instead of being like a list of best practices to do on stage, it's all of these best practices have context for why they contribute to the
Right.
bigger meaning of your gig and the experience that your audience is having at your gig.
Yeah, which I think is maybe the thing that has always, maybe not always from the early days, but like from pretty early high school age, I've always been fascinated with crowds and figuring out a crowd and where those people are and what they want and trying to figure out how to give that to them. Mm-hmm. And it's so often, gosh, what were we talking about in the car? It's so often not the things you think of very often as a musician. Like, you don't pay a bunch of money and go to some concert and this and that because you just want to hear a song sung well or a guitar solo done. That's part of it. Mm-hmm. But that's not really what that experience is about. Mm-hmm. And, because we were talking about like, we were talking about woos.
Getting the woo.
When the crowd goes woo when you do something, and we were talking about how like this is just an example, maybe like a gateway into the idea. I could play the same guitar solo lick thing, and I could throw the guitar up high and do the whole thing. If I do that in the first or second song, it's not going to get the woos because I haven't built a relationship with that crowd. Mm-hmm. But by the end of the show, when I do that, mm-hmm. it's all woos because we like know each other and we're supporting each other. And, mm-hmm. And I believe so much, we've talked about it on the pod sometimes. I believe so much in that energy exchange thing, mm-hmm. which is really like the big thing. So I think that's what's going to be different about this book is starting with those kind of concepts of like, why do we do it as performers? Why do audience members even come to shows? Mm-hmm. What are the various experiences they're wanting to have? Mm-hmm. I think it's going to be a really interesting thing because there's tons of information about performing out there, but
not as much as you'd think.
I shouldn't say tons. There's of course Tom Jackson, and then
Yeah, but I haven't looked recently. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
But when I was looking for stage performance resources of any sort back in like 2010-ish, so a little more than a decade ago, all I could find for resources was Tom Jackson's materials.
Right.
2 CD masterclass by one woman who basically talked about walking on stage with intention. And then one guy named Alex Boyer, who I think is like a boy band guy, who has a CD series called "Don't Suck on Stage," and I got a few things from each of those latter two, and that was all I could find.
Yeah, and a lot of that stuff, if I'm remembering correctly, at least, is that more like you said, prescriptive. Like, here are the rules. Here's do this, do this, do this. And there's not that much about why would you do that? Mm. What are you trying to achieve by doing that? Mm-hmm. Anyway, let's go through some of the sections maybe. I'm sorry, I'm kind of
Yeah. No, let's look at it.
I'm driving the bus a little bit too
I
much
need
here.
to put my glasses on now. I'm going to
Yeah.
look smart.
So we don't have a title, so that's one
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Trying to figure out the title. I don't know. Hopefully it'll come to us. Again, if you have any ideas. So let's see. So it's going to be 2-part book. Part 1 is, what is it? I mean, none of this is final, but like, what is it we're even trying to do here when we perform? So that bigger picture stuff we talked about. And that includes like why people go to shows.
And I think that's something I'm so surprised that for the most part, a lot of musicians never really examine that question. There's so many musicians who seem to, and I don't know, I'm only going by having conversations with people, they've never really even stopped to think very much about like what are you actually trying to do when you go on stage, you know? Mm-hmm. And you would say, well, I want to entertain people or I want to whatever, but like but no, what does that mean? And so I think it's going to be great getting into that, and yeah, we're going to talk about what the experience is, what the experience is for both parts. You know, I think one thing we were having so much fun talking about was that the it factor.
Yeah.
And how, you know, what is having it, and people talk about, oh, they just got it.
Yeah.
And we were talking about, like, can you learn it? Do you just have to be born with it?
Yeah.
Because I firmly believe, like, I think it's a misconception some people have where either you're just a great performer or you're not.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Like it's a natural thing. And that's not true. You can absolutely develop yourself as a great performer. I'm sure I did not start good.
I know I didn't.
Yeah. I mean,
you watched me come up.
Yeah, and it is a skill you can learn just like anything else. When I teach stage performance, I tell people your performance is a skill that you can practice, just like your guitar scales and just like your piano scales and your vocal exercises. It's something you literally need to work on. Mm-hmm. It's not just something that happens. So but talking about the factor of it, like what's it and whether or not you can develop it, how you do it. Let's kind of go through some more sections here.
Why we play shows as artists, why we go on stage.
Right.
So we examine those questions. Connecting with the entire audience, what that means, how to do it.
Right.
How to make it not happen.
Yeah. Things to not do.
Yeah, what the audience needs from you. Being confident. Oh, reading the room. That's a big one.
Well, I mean, I was just talking about exactly that. And that's sort of my favorite thing is like, and I've talked about it on the pod before. That's why I sometimes not hate. I always talk in these really negative terms. I sometimes dislike playing to too drunk of an audience because I can't psychically find them. Because it's just sort of scattered and chaotic and everybody's partying and stuff. And that's great. And I'm glad everybody's having a good time. But I have the most fun as a performer when I feel like I can lock into like what's going on in this room right now. And as a side person, it's not necessarily me that's the big deal, but I like knowing, like, it's like a very, like, out-of-body thing. So, and there are just things about reading the room where, some of it's all woo-woo and feely and stuff, and then some of it's, like, there's some hard skills to being like, hey, pay attention to these things,
Yeah. And then, along with that, the energy cycle that we've talked about.
Right, we've talked about that energy. Yeah. Performer puts it out into the room, audience throws it back at the performer, performer gets more amped up, they dish it out to the audience harder. I've talked about how brilliant it is that you will say that to audiences sometimes. We'll do a big jammy thing and it gets all crazy in the room and you'll be like, that was you guys.
Yeah.
So cool. And then once we've done part 1, then it's going to be just talking about all the hard skills. I mean, those are sort of the soft skills in a way. And then the hard skills of
talking to the audience.
Right.
The different ways of, like, the different kinds of things that you say. There's, like, different times in a set where it's appropriate to say different kinds of things.
I love the way you broke that down and what you wrote, where there's just sort of these, like, little, there's the thank you section. There's the welcome section. There's the
promotional section, maybe. There's the intimate story section.
Yeah, there's the goodbye.
There's the hype.
Yeah, the hype. Yeah.
Yeah, all that stuff. And then and you have a equation for song intros.
Yeah, there's almost an equation to how you put together an emotional story that, like, when you just, it's this plus this equals this. And when you show people how those things go together, then all of a sudden you've got a meaningful song intro. And then all the way down to just the skills of the real stagecrafty skills of, like, how do you deal with microphones? How do you deal with monitors? How do you decide to move around on stage? Where do you go on stage? Blocking. And so much of that stuff we've talked about, like, I don't even know where I picked up a lot of it. But blocking's one of those things I never in my life thought about until I started noticing other people did not know how to do blocking. That sounds arrogant to say, but I just really honestly, like, it made all the sense in the world to me that, like, everybody else steps back on verses, and then when it gets to the chorus, you step forward so that the band, it's just, I don't know where, I can't for the life of me think of someone telling me that, but you just see it a million times. Anyway, yeah, that's our book. And again,
a few more things we have here.
God, I'm being terrible.
No, you're fine. I'm just going to interrupt you, and we don't have to edit that.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. I like talking about amplifying yourself. Like, that was a whole section. Like, a big part of being a good performer is finding the part of yourself that you want to amplify and then making that larger than life on stage.
Right.
So we have some techniques for that. A section on how to make people not like you. So this is the don'ts of the do's and don'ts.
I think that's going to be so vital because there are those things that you just see people do sometimes or have done yourself sometimes where you're like, oh, this is doing me no favors with this crowd.
Yeah. We have advice on building a kick-ass set.
Yeah, the set list part of it, which, as we've talked about on this show, we are big believers that the flow of a show is just vital to how the whole thing goes. It's like, no matter how good you are and how well you do these things, if the flow of the order of the songs you're doing isn't good, then it's just not going to be a great emotional experience. What do you got here? Talking about bad shows?
Yeah, how to handle bad shows and how to prevent them from happening in the first place.
Right.
How to reduce the percentage of bad shows that you have. I mean, sometimes things are out of your control, but there's a lot you can do to prevent bad shows.
And then there's stuff you can do when you're just having a bad show and it just is not fun. There are actual things you can do to just make it work.
Yeah. And then we have some advice on how to apply all these skills. It's not just a list of skills. It's like advice on how to tackle what is a lot of information and integrate it slowly. And
I think that's going to be vital because we are covering the A to Z of all of this. I think there's some we're going to at least try, right? So I think that last part you were talking about like, here's how you actually start implementing these things. Because as we've talked about, you can't, I'm going to try to improve on 100 things this show. Like,
pick one.
Yeah, you got it.
Just one. One new challenge at a time. So yeah, if you have ideas for anything you'd like to see in the book that appears like it's not in our outline yet, I would love to hear from you. And maybe we can include it.
Yeah, and gosh, if you could title this thing, guys.
Give us a great title that would go viral and sell 1 million copies.
And again, I know there are millions of you out there, so let's... I
want every single one of you to suggest 5 book titles.
5 book titles.
We'll get 5 million book title ideas.
We'll be back from vacation in a week. 5 by 5, guys.
All right, so that is our next week's podcast, meaning you're hearing this a week and a half after it was recorded, because when you hear it, we're going to be in Panama.
You're right. So, well, thanks for hanging in there. We wanted to give you guys something, and we are very excited about this book, and we did want to share with the people who do listen, if they have any ideas, any thoughts. And we're just going to keep cranking on it.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll have tons to talk about on our trip. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, see you next week. Thanks for tuning in.